Hello again, everyone. Welcome to episode 20 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. Today, we're covering the first half of a novel by an author whom none of us have read before, so things should be interesting. As we announced at the end of last week, the subject of discussion for today is the sci-fi debut A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. It's the first novel in the Teixcalaan series, that is spelled Teixcalaan. And by, of course, the first half, what I mean is that we're going to discuss everything up until the end of chapter 10 for today. Quick shout out before we get the show started. A shout out to Melissa Hanks, who has become our newest $10 Patreon tier member. What's up, Melissa? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And so now that that's out of the way, I'm your host, Rob Santos. I'm joined, as always, by the stalwart Mr. Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going?
My co-host. Who is going to give us a brief overview of what's happened up until this point in the narrative. Drew, take her away, dude.
Yeah, so this is a pretty heavily involved political science fiction book that we're...
No shit. Yeah.
Yeah, so kind of the premise here is that there is a independent space station called Liesel Station. I don't really know how to pronounce some of these words.
Well, I've been listening to the audiobook, so I can kind of help you out with a few of those, I guess. This one is Liesel.
Liesel, okay.
Liesel.
Yeah, because they have a lot of doubled consonants in their names and stuff.
They do.
But so they are not part of the Teixcalaan Empire, but they have open relations with them. And the previous ambassador from Liesel Station has died. Presumably by an allergic reaction to something.
Yeah, anaphylaxis apparently.
Yeah, and our main character, whose name is Mahit Desmare, is that how they pronounce it?
Mahit Desmar.
Desmar, okay. And so she's sent to replace the old guy whose name I say is Yiskander. Iskander.
You got it. You nailed it. Yiskander.
Awesome. And the big conceit for this book is that the inhabitants of Liesel Station have this technology called an imago machine that is like an implant into your nervous system that integrates the memories and personality of a previous person who's died. And so Mahit has an old version, 15 years out of date, of Yiskander, and to help her acclimate to the politics and the culture of the Teixcalaan Empire. But upon arriving in the city, as it is called, which is this empire,
yes,
planet spanning, planet spanning city that's the heart of the empire. She is shown the dead body of the previous ambassador, and upon seeing this body, her imago version of Yiskander in her head freaks out and dissociates from her, and she's stuck with no real guide anymore. And so she's thrown in the deep end of this volatile political situation that develops to the point where she's trying to find out information, and there's a bombing that kills her informant, and she gets almost arrested, but is through some savvy political maneuvering finds asylum with one of the most prominent politicians in the empire, named 19 Ads, because the names in the empire are really cool, actually.
I actually kind of like those, yeah.
Yeah, but so she's more or less like a political prisoner in this other politician's apartments, and finally, goes to a banquet, meets the clone of the current emperor, and meets some of the other big-time political players. And where we ended off, she actually got an audience with the emperor himself and found out that her previous, the previous ambassador, Yiskander, made a promise with the emperor that he would trade the secret imago technology to the empire for what is essentially independence for Liesel Station in perpetuity. And of course this all happens at the same time that the Empire has declared a new war on the region of space, a war of conquest just past Liesel Station that will presumably bring LaSalle Station into the Empire officially.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's good to know on my part that I understood most of it fully, because this, like as Drew said at the top of the show, this is a very involved book. There's a lot to digest here. I admit once again, with a schedule like mine, that I've been listening to the audiobook for most of this. And by most of this, I mean I listened to the audiobook from the beginning up through chapter 8, and then I decided I'm really not absorbing as much as I feel like I should be, so I'm going to buy it on the e-reader as well. So now I have 2 copies. I have one on from Audible, and I have an e-reader copy as well on my Kobo. And boy, this is a difficult book. I will come right out and say it. I mean, Kane's Law, the one we just finished, was difficult for different reasons in terms of, narrative structure, in terms of chronology. In this case, it's a difficult book just because I feel like it's just simply beyond me. You get a whole, there's so much to digest. Like, first off, we get these complicated moral questions right out of the gate, which I love, actually. As an aside, we get situations that I really hadn't even considered up until this point, which seems to make total sense when you consider the direction that our current technology is taking us. You know, the idea right out the gate of owning one's own genome. You know, that's not even a question I'm prepared to face fully, let alone offer any kind of commentary on. But like I said, with the direction our current technology is taking us, what with like the unlocking of the human genome, and now with CRISPR, as well as any number of advances in the STEM fields, I mean, this is something that these are questions that they will eventually need considering. And I like how Martine is dabbling in that a little bit, while also giving us a little bit of plot, some intrigue to sit there and feast our eyes upon. And I want to say it's a really, really bold move on Martine's part, in my opinion, to start a novel with intrigue rather than action. You know, it takes a lot more balls than I have, and I think she pulled it off rather well. It was a risky move, but I think she nailed it.
Yeah, I do think she nailed it. When I got to that scene with Yaskander's dead body and that just like intense, emotional and chemical like dissociation of Mahit's imago, and I mean it was like she's having this full on panic attack, and I was like by association having this like panicked response.
No, same.
And like I was hooked from that point. I've really enjoyed this book, and it is in large part due to that scene. Like, I haven't been this hooked by a new book in years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that scene, I was sweating right along with her. I was like, oh my god, she has an implant just like his. And she's just like sitting there just like, oh, I don't know what this is. Maybe it could be this. Maybe it could be that. And she's just trying to deftly maneuver, just deny any kind of knowledge of what's going on. That scene was a great hook, that scene. I will agree absolutely with you in that respect.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's, like, the other thing I've really enjoyed about this so far is the wordplay. Words and narratives are so important in the culture of the Tixkolanli Empire. And it allows, of course, it's all by design, but it allows Martine to really flex her muscles as a writer. And she gets,
as a linguist,
I mean, she gets to do really, really clever things. I love like the couplets, the poetry that the imperial just like fashion is of communication. And
oh, you like that, eh?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's different.
See, it really was like again, this is where I said at the top of the show where I think a lot of this book is just simply beyond me. I think this is one of those cases. I just had no patience for the kind of syntax and the grammar and the poetry of the Tixkolanli language. I was just like, oh my god, let's get on with the plot. But as I said a few times, and I will reiterate, it could just simply be beyond me. It could just be being a dumbass. I don't want to condemn Martine for that at all.
So are you not a fan of like the chapter epigraphs that kick off every...
No, the chapter epigraphs, I like that because they provide context.
Yeah.
They're kind of a wider view of what's happening elsewhere in a lot of cases in this narrative. I do appreciate those. I'm a sucker for chapter epigraphs. Always have been, and I think I always will be, regardless of their content. I think aesthetically they just provide a whole other level of just fucking awesome. But it's, for me, like, they only, like... I'm torn. I'm so torn because Martine is clearly a great writer. She clearly knows what she's about and she's not fucking around. That said, she keeps losing me when she goes on these long tangents about syntax over like what's actually happening in Mahit's surroundings, because we only get one point of view, and that's Mahit's point of view.
Right. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. For a second, I thought we might have got one from 19 ads, but now I'm thinking of Ironsides from Skyward. Never mind.
That's actually kind of funny, because I could see her as like a similar kind of imposing figure as Admiral Ironsides.
Right. Yeah. I had that specific thought while I was actually welding, and then I was sitting inside of a container, and I thought, well, then again, Ironsides is like a general. She's a military commander. Yeah. It's a little bit different. But it did strike me right away. It absolutely did, yeah.
But going back to her writing and her style, like one of the things that has leapt out at me through the first part of this is that she has a tendency to write big blocks of text.
She does.
Like long, descriptive passages about the city, because the city is important. Like, this is with a capital C. Like, it's almost its own character in a way. And I think we're only going to get more of that in the second half of this book. But so how she kind of pulls off these big blocks of text without overwhelming the reader or losing the reader is that she often starts them with one short line of dialogue that hooks you. It's something important. It's like a really weighted question that Mahit has for 3 Seagrass or 19 ads. And
interesting.
And she doesn't give us the answer to this question, the returning dialogue from this other character, until after like a page of description.
Oh, exposition. Yeah, she'll just go, yeah, okay. I've definitely noticed that, where a character, like a line of dialogue will come back in, and I'm like, what are they talking about? Oh, yes, this character's responding to something that we read 2 pages ago.
Yeah. It's a really clever, kind of writing technique. It's an opportunity for her to build her world, but keep the reader engaged, despite the fact that it's easy as a reader to kind of have your eyes glaze over when you see, like, oh my gosh, this paragraph's starting here, and it carries over onto the next page, all one paragraph. Like,
or in my case, if you're on audiobook, you're sitting there waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you're just like, okay, oh no, she's still going on. Okay, cool.
Yeah. but I like it. I really enjoy her style in this book. I have nothing but good things to say about this book so far.
I bet. When I was reading it, I kept thinking Drew is gonna fucking love this book.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we picked this as our first, like, new for 2019 novel to read for the podcast. So this is 2019.
This is not 2018. This is brand new.
Yeah, this came out at the end of March. I think it was March 21st. Yeah.
Wow. So this has really only been out, not even for 2 months yet.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh shit! I thought it was like a year, something like that. I figured it was current. I didn't think it was that current.
Mm-hmm.
Well chosen there, Drew. Nice.
Yeah. So
yeah.
But kind of moving on from the writing style, I want to talk about like Mahit as the main character.
Sure.
Like, what do you think about her? Do you enjoy being in her head?
Okay. Well, I'll start off by saying I don't have a whole lot on the subject of me. I do have some, and I'll get through it. She seems capable, and it's hard not to empathize with someone in her position. I mean, she is, for all intents and purposes, culturally shell-shocked in this society, which she's grown up studying and admiring. And though she speaks the language rather well, which for me is actually a point of envy, I've got to admit, as my own second language is rather rusty. And Drew, you are going to get a witness of this firsthand in the next episode we record today.
Yes.
But as it is, there's only so much common ground I can find with a character who is A, female, B, brave enough to immerse herself in an entirely new culture, and C, competent enough and intelligent enough to understand not only the finer points of politics, but the ever-increasingly ludicrous syntax of the Tixkalani language. For me, Mahit is an entirely unrelatable character, but on the other hand, it doesn't really make her viewpoints suffer. Like, I don't hate them. I'm not going back to them going, more of this again, I am still intrigued, and I am still involved. There's another word I'm looking for. I'll probably think of it later. Invested, thank you.
What a word to forget, man.
Mahit. Yeah, thank you. Considering our history with the Cosby. And I do want to say I like the furtive the fertile narrative ground that we get with her problems in particular. You know, she's walking around with this entire other person in her head, but it's one who just vanishes right when she needs him. You know, we get glimpses of Yaskander here and there.
We do.
Shadows, tantalizing fragments. You know, it starts off with the ghosts of feelings, I'll say. You know, the echo of fondness and frustration when she hears 15 Engine's name.
Yeah.
Blatant fondness, even some blatant arousal in the presence of 19 ads.
Oh, yeah.
But where I really started getting freaked out was during Mahit's scene in 19 ads' shower when she sees her own hand as a man's hand.
Yeah.
And she feels the water from the shower head hitting lower on her back. You know, that was fucking scary. I mean, that gave me the heebie-jeebies. That right there is some horror movie shit, and I like it. It's the excellent way to build up tension with that character and remind us, despite all of the ostensibly boring politics, depending on who you are, that all is not in order with Mahit's identity or her memory.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, man?
Yeah, so, you know, you talked about her, you know, her identity as a woman and as somebody who's so eager to throw herself into a new, challenging, scary, foreign situation, right? And I, in a lot of ways, I agree with you there. The best way I can describe it is I don't have sympathy with her, but I feel empathy.
That's a great way to put it.
Like, I am invested in her character. I love being inside her head and getting a perspective on somebody who is so different from me. And, you know, because, like, I mean, like you, my second language, which is Spanish, I am extremely rusty on. You know, I haven't really practiced in a couple of years, and you know, I've forgotten so much vocabulary. And so the idea of
French.
Yeah, the idea of being immersed in a foreign culture and a foreign language is terrifying to me. It's something that I'm sure, knowing myself, after, you know, like a day or two, I would be like, okay, no, like, time to stop being scared, time to, like, you know, put your nose to the grindstone and do this thing. But I wouldn't willingly put myself in that situation.
No, and quick shout out to my sister Nicolina, who did exactly that, by the way, a couple of years ago. Well, not a couple, I'd say about 6 years ago. She just decided, you know what, I'm going to spend a few months living in Quebec City. And oh boy, she has some stories to tell about that. Yeah. I mean, apparently the Quebecois French are not very forgiving to foreigners in their home, in their setting there. But anyway, so I just wanted to give her a quick shout out because, like I said, that takes way more courage than I have.
Yeah, but so what I really do love and I do connect with is Mahit's cleverness. It's her love of playing games and playing, you know, conversational games with people. And like, I do
have a quote about that.
I particularly enjoyed her conversation and her interaction with Ten Pearl at the banquet, where she pulls off this, like, backward, uncultured barbarian, where it's so obvious that she's faking it that Ten Pearl's like, well, obviously she's faking it, but he's still like, wait, or is she? And
we get a little bit of Serene and Wraithen from Elantris in that kind of mode, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. You know, back in our Elantris episodes, I talked about how much I love that scene up on the wall when Wraithen's, you know, having his sermon, and Serene comes in and messes the whole thing up by acting like a bumbling idiot. And it's not quite the same exact thing here, but it is a similar type of manipulation and you know, an interpersonal you know, facade that she's putting up. And I really enjoy that she's so, you know, fish out of water, you know, not in her element, scared, alone, and yet she still finds not only the confidence but the joy and the satisfaction in messing with people like this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, on that same subject, there was a conversation. I have a quote written about exactly this. It was in chapter 3, when we're just getting to know, you know, the main characters. We're just getting to know 3 Seagrass in particular, and you know, we get the arrival of 19 ads in the chamber to, you know, while they're observing Yaskander's body, and at one point, it was 3 Seagrass that says, how nice for us that everyone lies.
Yes.
And we get from Mahit the response, cultural exchange through mutually beneficial deception.
Yep.
And I just love that. I had a quick guffaw out loud when I was welding when I read that. That was a really clever bit of wordplay there. And as you were saying, that is the kind of thing that we get to see out of Mahit again and again as her kind of defense mechanism with this whole fish out of water scene and this whole cultural shell shock that she's experiencing. I do really, really enjoy those brief moments of respite that we get because they are awesome.
Yeah.
They are awesome.
Yeah. And sticking with characters here, what do you think of Three Seagrass?
Well, I just had one more point about Mahit that I wanted to get out of the way.
Oh, yeah.
And then I'll totally jump on that question because I have lots to say about her. But the last thing I wanted to discuss about Mahit was this. I am concerned with her level of suspicion. It doesn't really seem healthy to me. She internalizes this motivation for practically everyone she meets to want her dead. And on one hand, I guess it's hard to blame her, seeing what's happened to Yaskander, or at least what we assume has happened to Yaskander.
And what has
now
almost happened to her twice.
Yes, with this flower attempt. I guess, yeah,
and
the bomb. But at that point, we didn't really know what it was for. Like I kind of assumed it was for 15 Engine, who was a important political entity in his own right. But what concerns me the most is when she starts suspecting Three Seagrass, or maybe not even suspecting, but when she's asked, she replies that she trusts her as much as anyone in the city.
Yes.
And I was like, come on, Mahit. You know, she even suspected 19 ads, assuming that the woman actually wanted her dead, but only saved her life as a sort of kind of impulsive last moment change of the mind. You know, I'm starting to get concerned with just how suspicious Mahit is being of everyone around her, you know?
Yeah, no, that's definitely fair. But I think
that was my sorry, go ahead.
I think it's interesting how you brought up like you're almost exasperated with Mahit over her suspicion of Three Seagrass.
Yeah.
Because I like Three Seagrass. I think she's too likable. I think we are in for a twist there that she does not have Mahit's best interests at heart, and we're going to get some kind of betrayal by Three Seagrass, possibly also by 12 Azalea. And we're gonna find out down the line that 19 ads is a better political friend of Mahit's than Mahit suspects.
That's interesting. Well, this is the perfect jump off point to start discussing Three Seagrass in depth.
Yeah,
I suppose. So like you just said to me, she's a lovable character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she reminds me a lot, and I'm sure you might have picked up on this too. She reminds me a lot of Steris from Mistborn Era 2. No spoilers, of course. I'm not going to go into spoilers. But there's a point when she asks Mahit, "Are you going to finish that drink?" This is at the banquet. And Mahit says, "Yes." "Why?" And she goes, "Because I'm going to have to talk about 14 Spire's use of assonance for the rest of the evening, and you're going to have to listen, and we should both be slightly more inebriated."
Yeah.
I love that quote, you know? She's just so quirky. She's always got this fresh perspective to compliment Mahit's, but she definitely breathes as her own character. She's got her own idiosyncrasies. These things with the syntax, again, of the Tixkalani language that just seem to irk her a lot, in the same way that certain things about the English language seem to irk me and you. You know,
okay.
She's to me she's a lot more relatable than Mahit is. And also, of course, there was that quote that I want to throw forth, that what happened right after 15 Engine just, you know, kaboom, exploded, and she was searching for Mahit in the rubble, and she goes, "I would really like you to be alive." And then when she finds out she is, "Great, fantastic. Reporting your death to the Emperor would be incredibly embarrassing and possibly end my career, and also I think I'd be upset."
Yeah.
I love that line. She's just this little fluffy ball of fun, and every time she opens her mouth, I'm interested.
Yeah.
I want to hear what she's got to say.
Fun is exactly the word to describe her. She's
right.
And that's why I'm suspicious. Is I think she's too fun. Like that it can't be purely natural. Like I think she does have some aspects of this in her personality, but that she's overplaying them for the sake of Mahit.
Sure.
we're going to
like
be in line for
stereotypical,
some
perhaps?
kind of turn in her character in the second half of this book.
That's interesting. I haven't see. Normally, I'm really suspicious of people. I mean, we've seen that in past podcasts. I have not even had the slightest whiff of suspicion in like coming off of her. Like I haven't even begun to suspect her yet. So I'm really interested to see
Yeah.
where the hell that goes.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I don't think I have any more particularly about Three Seagrass to discuss.
I don't immediately either.
Oh yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot more at the end of the book.
Oh yes.
What do you want to discuss next then?
Hmm.
19 ads, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. Pardon me, I was in the middle of taking a sip of my beer here.
Oh, no problem there. I was just in the middle of searching through my phone notes here.
Um,
Okay. Go ahead, dude. Take her off.
Yeah, so 19 ads is one of these formidable characters that you get in books who have just by their nature, by their formidable nature, a threatening, looming presence on the page. And I think Martine is using that as a device to both keep Mahit off balance, but also to eventually build her up to the point where she can gain the confidence, to deal with somebody like 19 ads or 30 Larkspur, right? It's she's kind of a measuring stick character that Mahit, as this young, untested, not naive, but like she lacks confidence. So it's her role model in many ways, and that comes through on the page where she talks about how like she's annoyed with 19 ads and her like just assumptive superiority, but she also finds herself grateful for the way 19 ads protects her and praises her and things like that. And it's that approval that Mahit is going to end up needing to get over in order to find her own confidence and not need validation from people that she sees as her superiors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we get that kind of play between their personalities where 19 ads jokes about Mahit being a prisoner, and Mahit jokes about being a prisoner, and she kind of is, but she kind of isn't, and figuring out that kind of ground between them and where their personal boundaries lie in their interactions. It's been pretty interesting to read. Right. 19 ads definitely is a formidable person, and she is fascinating to read. She has great insight on things. She has this sort of I hesitate to say protective kind of vibe of Mahit, but as we know now, she and Yaskander were intimately involved.
Yes.
And it's got to be hard for somebody like 19 ads to know that this person with whom she was so familiar with she was so enraptured with, exists in some form inside Mahit's head, and how she kind of she's trying to figure out these personal boundaries as well. I see, like, again, this is something I'm going to discuss a lot with Martine, throughout the rest of this episode, is the societal implications of this kind of technology and the interactions they lead to. I think that they're just fascinating. 19 ads for me might be my current favorite character in the book. And there might be, and it might just be because of one fucking line that she had in chapter 6.
Oh.
And it was when she said, "If you've had enough of politics." And I went, "Oh my God, yes, please, for fuck's sake, I've had enough of this shit." This book has so much politics in it, and I'm just struggling to find the plot. I'm constantly going through it. I'm just like, okay, something's going to happen. Nothing happens. And in that moment, I feel like we got a little bit of fourth wall breaking on the part of 19 ads when I think, and I don't know this for a fact, obviously, but to me, it kind of read like Martine becoming a little self-aware in that, okay, I'm getting maybe there's too much politics happening. I should at least make a joke about it, So, 19 ads for me, just to recap, fascinating to read. Probably my current favorite character. Oh shit, Three Seagrass is really fun though.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's formidable. She's formidable, and I look forward to reading anything we get out of her. Definitely, I do enjoy 19 ads.
Yeah, and so we were talking earlier about how there are some similarities between 19 ads and Admiral Ironsides from
Sure, yeah.
Skyward, and how maybe there's
Not to
some,
spoil anything,
yeah,
obviously,
maybe
yeah.
there's some similarities between Three Seagrass and Steris from Mistborn.
They are strong, empowered women, you know?
You can draw, like, maybe some parallels there, but these characters, for the most part in this book, really stand on their own, and I can't really come up with like a good one-to-one comparison for any of them. And
Sure.
and that's rare to me. I've read so many hundreds of books over, the course of my life, that it's very rare that I find a truly original character. And I think that's a testament to the culture and world that Martine has created here in A Memory Called Empire. That they have unique, not only motivations but personalities, and the way they act as people is so different. And I really enjoy that. I love how original this book is.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that kind of brings me to what I want to talk about at my next point, and that's the
Sure.
setting. Because the setting, the city and the city and the world and the empire, as it has been made so clear in the book, are kind of inextricably the same. And
Yeah.
and it's this monolithic, creepy sort of feeling. And I do want to draw a parallel here, and that is to the Acts of Cain, where
Oh?
the sunlit remind me so forcibly of the
Of
social
the Sec Men?
police. The social police.
Oh, yeah. The social police,
The
yeah.
faceless, homogenous, like almost collectively hive mind operative police force. That the moment, there was that scene when the city like rose up out of the plaza to contain all the witnesses of the bombing.
With, like, all the blue
Yeah.
light in
Yeah.
the area.
And people keep saying, "Oh, we'll wait for the sunlit to get here." And
Yeah.
from the moment the sunlit were first mentioned, I just had this immediate sense of creepy foreboding. And then they showed up on the page,
Really?
and I was like, "Oh yeah!" Like immediately, I was like, "Social police, right here. This is
Wow.
soapy."
You see, this is interesting because I kind of had the opposite reaction. The
Really?
sunlit just sounds so friendly, you know? There's something about the aesthetic of the city, the golden sky, the colors and everything, There's something very, very calming and peaceful, warm, I guess is the kind of the word I want to use about it. The sunlit, obviously once we got the descriptions of the sunlit, like the hard descriptions, the fact that they have these face plates or these domes that cover the entirety of their face, not just a section of their face, and how they're supposed to appear, very, very similar, and they're supposed to be faceless. But that's where the similarity ended, though, because they didn't strike me as menacing so much as they were just dudes trying to do their job. They weren't soulless. They still had personality a little bit to me. More so than the soapies did. No? I see Drew kind of shaking his head with a little smile there.
I did not think so at all, because that one scene when Mahit is talking to the sunlit officer, and he goes back and talks to the rest, and she immediately loses track of which one is which. She has no perception of even if they're men or women. I say he, but we don't know. And then we
in
got
science
that.
fiction, we get that a lot.
Well, but
Right?
the whole point
With,
was
like,
that they
this
were
faceless kind of
yeah.
organization.
And
exactly,
then
this kind of faceless entity on behalf of those in power, right? We get this a lot in science fiction.
But the biggest thing was when she has the memory of Yiskander's conversation with Ten Pearl and talking about the algorithm of the city, and he mentions the sunlit and mentions how they do not have individual personalities. They are a collective, like, hive mind.
I missed that part of it. Oh.
And
okay, well, that might have drawn
and
my
he talks
connection
about
more.
like how there must be some kind of, like the Imago machines, some kind of neurological adaptive technology that they have, because Yiskander saw or met somebody who wanted to become a sunlit and seemed like a normal dude. But then,
Huh.
and that was totally incongruous with the way the Sunlit actually are.
I somehow missed out on that little
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah. So that's I think the Sunlit are going to be a big deal here in the second half of the book. I don't see them taking like an active like plot oriented role unless they're involved in One Lightning's uh maybe attempted
One
coup.
Lightning.
But I also don't know if he really feels the need to to have an uprising, any kind of insurrection on his behalf, since he has what he wants now. We have the war declared. We have him in charge. He's been granted authority over the legions, all this, and that's what he wants. So
what about this entire other entity that is Odile, this insurrection that's happening there? What do we think is going on in that regard?
Man, I don't
I got
know.
it right. Odile?
Odile, yeah.
That's holy shit. I just had like a brain fart. I was like, wait, was it a P? Opile? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I really don't even know what to think there. And this is another thing I really like about this book is that Odile has been referenced so many times that
I feel like we're going to see more of that. We're going to see more of that in another book or maybe later in this book, but it's going to be important to what's going on, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But at the same time, there is this much more sinister, much more dangerous, mysterious alien entity with the like concentric rings ships that showed up outside of the Lascelles station jump gate during one of the epigraphs. The report.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it wasn't during the narrative; it was an epigraph that we saw that in. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And then they didn't go into it in the narrative at all. I was like, "Okay, I want to read more about that."
So, and I think they are going to be much more dangerous than anybody, including the Tixkolanli, believe, and they are coming from that region of space that the Empire is going to be invading here. I think that war is not going to go the way One Lightning wants it to. And
interesting.
And that's where, like, you keep saying you're like, I'm tired of the politics. I want some plot here. I think. That's
I haven't even gotten started, my friend. Just wait.
I think that's where your action is going to really come in. Is
good.
This
good.
This war is not going to go the way everybody thinks it will.
God. Yeah. Oh man, we're gonna have to censor a lot of this episode. Sorry, I just after we're done with Kane, I'm just like bombs flying out of my mouth everywhere. What did Stover do to me? Jeez. Anyway, yeah. So, are there any other characters that you want to discuss specifically before we just kind of go into like closing thoughts, overall impressions, predictions? I will admit, I actually totally fucking forgot to make predictions. But I can.
I don't really have anything more to talk about characters. I think pretty much everybody else has been straightforward, with the exception of and now I'm blanking on his name. Antidote.
Antidote. Yeah, we got the same name at the same time. Yep.
How creepy is that little kid?
See, okay, so I do have one specific thought about Antidote written down, but it wasn't so much about his character as it was in Mahit's response to his character. Mm-hmm. And it was this. The introduction of Antidote, and I'm reading from my notes right now, was foreboding. I am suspicious of her supposed and inexplicable maternal instincts that I feel like in some way could be Iskander bleeding through to her consciousness again. I mean, he's been there for long enough. Iskander has, or it could just be the fact that I'm jumping the gun. I'm very, very suspicious of small details all the time.
I think you may be going down the same road I went down, and I'm curious because this is a prediction I have. But
yeah, this is like I was gonna say. If I have any predictions, this is one that I have written down as that one. Yeah.
So my prediction here is that much was made of the fact that this child is a 90% clone of Sixth Direction the Emperor. Where did that other 10% come from?
Yep. And these inexplicable maternal instincts that Mahit is feeling.
Well, no. Okay, no, we're back.
Yeah. No.
We're back.
Got me? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that other 10% is Iskander.
Interesting. I was actually thinking that the entire 90% clone thing could just be a fabrication. and that he is
Oh.
naturally Iskandar's kid, perhaps. But again, I don't know. I hadn't even considered that other 10% that Drew just brought to the spotlight, and I'm kind of a little more on that bandwagon now. That's interesting. I hadn't considered that.
It's just one of those things, like they've mentioned the 90% clone thing several times.
I know. It's like, yeah. I wonder if I could even count them on two hands now. How many fucking times they've mentioned that.
But my last kind of
there's that to
thought about 8 Antidote is that he reminds me of a character from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and that is the son of the Führer. So I'm not going to spoil anything. People who've watched the show know who I'm talking about and know why I'm saying this. But if you haven't watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, I'm going to go on a little tangent here. Watch it. It's legitimately one of the greatest written shows of all time.
I haven't seen it, so I'm learning right here too. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just absolutely brilliantly written, brilliantly paced, just fantastic world building. If you're
that's an anime, yes?
Yeah, so Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
Okay. Brotherhood.
Yes. So there are two shows. There's Full Metal Alchemist, which started based on a manga, but got ahead of the manga, and they kind of wrote their own ending to it. And then they remade the show once
D.B. Weiss and
yeah. And once the manga was completed, they went back and made a new show where they redid the whole thing. And Brotherhood, man, it's so good. But so 8 Antidote reminds me a lot of the son of the Führer in Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So
interesting.
That's my final thought on him.
Cool.
But
all right.
But yeah.
Can I Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, it sounded like you had a thought to finish there. I wanted to make
No. I was just going to say, like, if you wanted to go into overall impressions and predictions on.
Yeah, because I have a few complaints now to get out of the way.
Oh, sure.
So, okay, now, my problems with this book thus far are probably the same problems that I imagine a lot of other readers would have. And depending on who you are, you may or may not agree with this, but I personally found it boring. And there's nothing happening. I just can't get over how much time we spend listening to poetry, or more often simply the description of poetic verse, and the ridiculous complexity of the Tixkolanli language. I mean, this book feels like it's kind of just like an excuse. Everything that's happening is just an excuse to lecture us about the finer points of the syntax in this language here, and I do really briefly want to harken back to an earlier discussion we had about Martin versus Stover. Sans spoilers, of course, no spoilers involved. Mm-hmm. But during the Acts of Cain, I mentioned that what separates Stover and Martin for me was gratuity. Okay, like Stover writes grimdark, but he adds it as a companion to the plot. It's auxiliary. He pulls it off as rather matter of fact, and he moves on with his narrative. Martin, on the other hand, George R.R. Martin, seems to write grimdark for the sake of being grimdark. And I want to apply this thinking to what I've read so far from Martine in this book, A Memory Called Empire. Considering that we're halfway done with the book, we have several hundred pages out of the way, or if you're listening to the audiobook like I am, 9 hours of listening on my part. All we've had happen so far is that we've discovered Iskander was possibly murdered, 15 Engine got blown up in the street, and Mahit was almost assassinated by a deadly flower. And if you really take a step back and look at the big picture, not much has happened. We've definitely been subjected to a seemingly endless litany on the finer points of verbal and cultural exchange. I have a quote here to back this up. I didn't just, pull this out of my ass. Check this out. This was from Chapter 8, 8% read. This is on my e-reader. I'm quoting this from here. Mahit found herself, and this is during the banquet, standing on the edge of a circle of Tixkolanli Slim, watching them have what she could only describe as not a poetry contest, but a battle of wits conducted entirely in extemporaneous verse. It had begun as a sort of game. One of 3 Seagrass's evanescently clever friends took up the last line of 14 Spire's dull and prize-winning poem, said, "Let's play, shall we?" and proceeded to use that line as her first one, composing a quatrain that shifted the rhythm from the standard 15-syllable political verse form to something that was absolutely stuffed full of dactyls. And then she pointed her chin at another one of Three Seagrass's friends in challenge, and he took her last line, and apparently came up with a perfectly acceptable quatrain on his own, with no preparatory time. Mahit caught a few of his references. He was imitating the style of a poet she'd read, 13 Penknife, who used the same vowel sound pattern repeated on either side of the caesura. And at this point, I just wish I had a fucking gun to put in my mouth and just end it already. Oh my god, let's just get on with the narrative. I don't give a fuck about this fucking rap battle that Three Seagrass is having with her fucking friends here. At this point, it just seems, and this is how I just want to end up my bitching, because I could go on for a long time, but I don't want to make this a 2-hour episode. They're not... This entire book seems to be 10% plot, 20% Tix Kalan lead slim. I've heard that fucking word so many times in the audiobook that I just want to fucking throw my phone. And 70% lecture on the finer points of an invented syntax. And I don't know how I feel about it, because Martine feel like she reads like she's a great author. She has this clever turn of phrase. She has these absolutely original characters that I just love. Like, her characters are awesome. But I just can't get over how much politics and how much grammar and syntax and language and poetry that I've got to read just to get to anything interesting, in my opinion. But again, I do want to reiterate the fucking thing that I've said 100 times already in this episode. It could simply just be beyond me. What about you, Joe? What do you think? And don't hold back. If you think it's honestly, just go ahead.
So, I will address your first point there, where you said, like, all that's happened is, like, 15 engine got blown up.
There's a flower that almost killed Mahit.
Like, I would say there is much more than that's happened. I would say the fact that the war was declared is a big deal, and that greatly accelerates the timeline of this book.
Was that a surprise though, or did you expect that coming from the beginning?
It was. I mean, I wouldn't say I expected it from the beginning. I would say it, like, once there was the the video of the crowd in, what was it, like, Central Plaza 7, that they were all chanting for One Lightning and
One Lightning. Oh, there's a character I wanted to discuss and we totally forgot.
Well, but we haven't really gotten much of him. We haven't even, like, met him.
No, sorry. I guess when I say discussion, I just meant, like, what are your impressions on where that's going? But we can discuss that after your point here.
But so, there was that conversation between 19 Ads and Mahit about what that means and the past successions in the Empire. And from that point, I was like, okay, yeah, no, we're going to get some kind of a war declared as a political maneuver on the part of One Lightning. But that's still plot development. That's still a momentous thing happening here. And I will say, like, yes, you're right. This is a very heavily political book. A lot of these events are happening at a remove from our main character because, by nature, she's an ambassador. Like, she's not going to be fighting on the front lines.
Sure.
She's a different kind of character. She's not a Mirama from the Rune Lords, or a Vivenna from Warbreaker, or Vin from Mistborn, or somebody like, one of these kind of, like, so-called badass female characters. She is I would say she's a badass character in her own right. We talked about this at the top of the episode, where neither of us would ever be willing to put ourselves in this kind of, like, culture shock situation.
Unquestionably.
Right? She has her own kind of courage.
Sure.
And the fact that she's adapting to the situation the way she is. But she's not, just by the nature of being an ambassador, she's not going to be involved in a lot of the action. So this is a different kind of book. Yes, it's a space opera, but it's a thinker's space opera. It's a political space opera.
Right. And for me, that's where I draw my earlier statement that it could just be beyond me, because I'm personally just looking for the action. I'm looking for the characters who are fighting. And this may end up, if I end up liking Mahit enough and I end up liking this book enough, this could expand my proverbial palette for things like politics, for things like linguistics, things that are very heavily involved in the narrative of this book, you know?
You know, and I'll say, like, I hope that's the case. Part of the reason that I wanted to do this book was that I had a feeling it was going to be this type of story. And it's something that I enjoy quite a lot. And if we ever want to do the Book of the New Sun, like, man, you think this is a challenging book?
Oh, what are the odds? I meant to ask you about the Book of the New Sun before we even started this episode. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah. But at the same time, you know, it's not like this book is totally bereft of action, and I do expect there to be some action scenes by the end of the book.
What are you talking about? There's no... Okay, you're right, that's right. I was going to say, there's been no action so far, but then again, we're in the first half. I haven't even considered the second half.
But, you know, and Book of the New Sun's the same way. Like, it's a thinker's science fiction fantasy, but there are scenes of action in it, right?
Which I imagine is a lot harder to appreciate when you're listening to an audiobook. I also have to add that there, too.
Sure,
it could just be the fact that I'm consuming this mostly via audiobook. I have not the physical, but the e-reader for the second half, so I will be making an attempt to...
And my second point there is, like, I have to wonder if your impression of this book is tinted a little bit by the fact that you were, at the same time, reading the short piece, the novella that we're going to be recording our Patreon-only episode after this, which is absolutely action-packed.
Oh, I have so much to glow about with that.
So I have to wonder, you know, if that did, you know, make an impact on you when you're reading two different things at the same time, and they are so completely different, right?
And one is so much more geared towards what I have already established that I like. It could be that. I want to make very clear that I'm not condemning Martine in any way for writing a boring book. For me, it's boring, but it could be a problem with me. And it could be any number of things that I'm consuming at the same time that I find more interesting. I mean, I have lots that I do like about this book, but so far to me, it just feels slow and boring, and I really hope it picks up the pace.
Yeah, and maybe this is, you know, like we're saying, you know, it's a matter of taste. Because on my part, man, I cannot get enough of this book.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you brought up that quote about, you know, the game, the poetry game they were playing.
The rap battle that they have there of poetic verse.
Using it as, like, this example of, like, oh, this is so gratuitous. Like, I'm totally bored by this.
And in that moment,
loved that.
In that moment, I'm thinking, this is so much for Drew. This is the kind of thing that Drew would... And not to disparage you at all, but I want to concede that this is something that Drew would probably appreciate that I wouldn't, just because it's beyond me. Like, I just don't care for this kind of shit.
Yeah, you know, and this is definitely the writer in me coming out. Like, it's the appreciation, you know, for something that another writer is doing that, I mean, like, I couldn't write this book. This is, you know, you keep saying beyond me. This level of writing is absolutely beyond me. I would love to someday achieve this level of, like, a just involved metatextual prose, you know, like it's something that I would never even thought of trying.
I can imagine it works out to an art form in its own right.
Exactly, you know, it's and this is a cool thing about not only being a writer but being a reader, is that you can find brilliant writers across a wide spectrum doing totally different things, but also doing, you know, things that, you know, like, for instance, you have, like, Arkady Martine here writing this stuff. Matthew Stover couldn't write this kind of a book. I
would actually agree.
But I'm not gonna say that Arkady Martine is a better writer than Matthew Stover. I also don't think that Arkady Martine could write the kind of book that, you know, Stover did with Heroes Die or Blade of Tai Shao. Like, it's this brilliant part of being a reader and having this wealth of fantastic literature at our hands where we can read totally different kinds of books that fall under the same genres and follow in some ways the same conventions and tropes, but be engaging in completely different ways.
Yeah, and get entirely different benefits out of them.
Yeah,
you know, points of enjoyment out of them.
You know, and
based on our tastes. Yeah,
and you know, we're talking about speculative fiction here, right? Science fiction, fantasy, and how almost universally, you know, you may get some authors who try to say like, oh, I'm not trying to make a point with this, but almost universally, there is some kind of, if not a message or a moral, but there's a question that an author will bring up through this remove of, you know, we're writing in a different world, in a different culture, that you can bring back when you step away from the book and consider in the context of our world. And
Yeah.
both Stover, again, to make this comparison, both Stover and Martine did this, right? Stover had all kinds of things to say about like unchecked capitalism and you know, caste-based governments and you know, dictatorships and things like that. And Martine here, she has a you know, a touch, obviously, because this is a book written that came out in 2019, whereas Stover's came out in like the 90s and 2000s, where we already have questions to consider about like terrorism and what the threat of a bomb and like how it shuts down the subways.
I'm so glad you brought this up.
Yep. And what it does to the cultural psyche, where you have a government saying, you know, we had that scene at the end of chapter 10 where Maki meets Sixth Direction, the Emperor, and he talks about, we have peace. We've had peace for 80 years.
80 years. And 3 times like, your lifespan, yeah.
And she's like, but you haven't had peace. There have been insurrections and there have been bombings and things like that. But he's considering peace in this greater context that,
yeah,
you know, the bombings and the insurrections are so removed for him at the level of government that it is peace for him. But for the average person who now is like, man, like, is it even safe for me to go to my like neighborhood brunch spot because somebody might set off a bomb in it, you know? And that's a question that we have to grapple with as citizens in the world of 2019, where it's like, well, you know, if I go to the movie theater, is some lunatic going to come in with a couple of assault rifles and try to kill everybody?
Especially like, you living in Denver, you know, like that's
I mean, there was, you know, it was just a month ago. In fact, exactly a month ago was the anniversary of the Columbine shootings. And that week, there was a whole swath of Denver school district shut down because some girl from like Miami, Florida, who was obsessed with the Columbine shooters, had flown to Denver and gotten off the plane and legally purchased firearms and had made threats about shooting up schools in Denver. And there was this huge manhunt, and like, you know, so it's a very present concern that Martine is writing about from a cultural consciousness.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is honestly the last point that I had to talk about before we got into the final draft, was specifically surrounding this point. You know, there is this moment when 3 Seagrass is incapacitated by the blue light of the city just after 15 Engines' bomb went off, or the bomb that killed him went off. And there's this kindly old man who takes pity on them, and he gives them water. And he finds out that Mahit is from space, and he says something along the lines of, well, don't worry, you won't be a suspect in this.
Yeah.
And in this bombing. And my brain, my white privileged brain went, why would she be suspected of this? And then, oh shit, she's an outsider. She's kind of counter to the culture. She's definitely noticeable in being an outlier. And I just thought, I was like, is this just a total symptom of my white privilege that I didn't even consider this before this kindly old man brought this up? And that was honestly my last point that I wanted to bring up. So I'm really glad that you actually took the conversation in this direction, because it gave me the perfect jumping off point to mention that.
Yeah, you know, and this is something that I think, you know, beyond this book, but we always have to be conscious of when we're consuming science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, this is a political commentary, yeah.
Like there's always going to be some type of question to grapple with that you can bring away from the book. And this is one of the reasons that it pisses me off when I see people being like, "Oh, leave politics out of whatever." Leave politics out of Star Wars. It's like listen, dude. Like, if you were alive during the 70s and you watched the original Star Wars, like, there were such clear, like, you know, Nazi Germany parallels with the Empire. Like, Like George Lucas was making statements there, man. You know, and so of course now that we have new Star Wars movies coming out, they're going to be making, you know, apropos political statements in them, because that's the nature of speculative fiction. This is the beauty of it, is that we can address questions and address problems that we have from a remove, through a filter, so it's more easily accessible and addressable, right? And
Yes.
and I think Martine is really nailing it in this book with that.
You know what? After this conversation with you, I might be going into the second half of this book with a fresher perspective, with a greater appreciation of what I'm reading. Actually, I will admit that right out of the gate. I'm actually a little more now looking forward to the second half of this book.
Awesome. I think that's why we're doing this podcast, right?
That's the whole point of discussions like this.
Yeah, this is why we're doing this podcast. It's to spur conversations not only between us, but hopefully with our audience. We can give people a platform to approach books in a different way than maybe they've been approaching them, and let people address a genre that we all know and love, and get more out of it than maybe we have been in the past. So yeah, I think it's a good time, a good note after that to go into the final draft. Yeah.
Hell yeah, we can go into the final draft. I'll start us off since I have what I assume to be the boring choice. Once again, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am drinking a good old standard out of the fridge at the last minute Busch Ice. And my God, I have to say that it is, for all intents and purposes, fermented moose piss. I mean, it is disgusting. I have not been enjoying it throughout the entirety of this episode. I absolutely regret drinking it and not getting a witty beer of my own for this podcast. So yeah, I'll leave us with that, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh dear.
I do not recommend that beer.
Well, I have a somewhat thematically appropriate beer. I admit, today's been a bit of a mess. I didn't have the time and bandwidth to really find a great match. Sure. But I think it works. So I am drinking a single hopped New England style IPA. And it's a pretty solid beer. It's nothing to write home about. It's a little hoppy, a little on the bitter side for a New England style, which are usually a little more,
I suppose.
Well, but so the New England style IPA is usually a little juicier, a little fruitier, brighter. Doesn't have the piney kind of hops in it, but this has a little bit of the pine flavor. But it is called Single by Choice.
Oh,
and
interesting.
And it is from New Image Brewing.
Oh, New Image. Okay, I see what you're doing with that. Imago.
Yeah. So it was the best I could do on short notice. But
now it's still a damn sight nicer than my fucking pathetic attempt over here. Busch Ice. This fucking mud water, dishwater, rag bullshit. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. But so on that note, I think we're kind of at the end of our time here.
Sure. Yeah.
As usual, we want to invite you to take a look at our Patreon. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, we will be releasing Patreon-only episodes covering short stories and novellas. You'll want to check those out. There are also a bunch of other great benefits. And we want to reiterate, we're not trying to make money off of this. We're trying to make enough from the Patreon.
No, we have full-time jobs.
That we can pay our awesome sound engineer and thumbnail artist for the fantastic.
Shout out to Pat. Shout out to Danny. Yes.
Yeah, the fantastic work they do. So, but yeah, next week we will be finishing up A Memory of Called Empire, and hopefully we'll have a similarly engaging conversation for that one, since neither of us have read this book before. This is a new experience. But
and I kind of really like the one-on-one conversation we have. We could just keep firing back and forth. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll keep having guests back on the episode for further episodes. Just not for this particular book. But yeah. So this has been episode 20 of the Inking Out Loud podcast.
20 episodes we've had.
It's a milestone. We can almost legally drink.
Well, you can if you live in Canada, but you know,
yeah, so as usual, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey, and with me is your co-host, Rob Santos.
Yo.
And we'll catch you next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Peace.